What's up, everyone? This is Matt from Surf City TCG. I have an exciting one for you today. Pretty good one here. We've got Hashaton SCARAB'S FIST. This is the brand new commander from Aetherdrift, which hasn't been released yet, but this is the backup commander from the Eternal Might precon deck. You may have seen Temmet, who's the face commander, but this guy, Hashaton, the backup commander, is really where it's at. Temmet's cool, but man, this guy is powerful. So what does he do? He's 2 mana only, so Orzhov colors, white and black, but he's got a blue activation cost in his text box, so he's Esper colors, white, black, and blue. He's a 2 mana 1/3 zombie wizard, and he says whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 and a blue. If you do, you create a tap token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So it changes the creature's colors. If they weren't black, it is now black. And whatever its power and toughness were, it's instead a 4/4 zombie. So wow, quite a powerful ability here. He's actually a little bit similar to Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer, if you've seen that commander. I have a deck guide on Oscar as well. I'll link it here if you're interested in checking that out. But Hashaton is a little bit different because instead of playing the actual creature like Oscar does out of your graveyard, he just triggers when you discard and allows you to create a token. So that creature actually remains in your graveyard for any other shenanigans you might want to pull off, like reanimation effects or what have you. And then you end up with a tap token copy of it. So the way this plays out when I've played the deck is I just put the creature into play and use it as a representation of the token. But, this can get a little confusing if you need to know what's in your graveyard or others need to know. So you can use whiteboard tokens to represent the tokens that you're making as well, whatever you think is easier or whatever your opponents will agree to. So let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this card, and then I'll talk about how I decided to build this deck. And then we're going to do some practice hands. And lastly, I'm going to play a game on Spelltable and see how he goes. So first of all, strengths and weaknesses. So strengths, this is a cheap commander, only 2 mana, right? That's awesome. It means if he gets killed, you can replay him at 4, you can replay him at 6. Like, it's not that unreasonable. And, being a cheap commander, people may also have a value perception based on that and might not target him with removal. I'm not suggesting that that's the correct thing to do because I think he's extremely dangerous, but that might happen. You might see that, like, if you run him out on turn 2, people just aren't removing him because it's only 2 mana. You can just replay it. People can sometimes have that sort of mentality and not make the tempo plays they need to make in order to cause them to not lose the game. So don't make that mistake if you're up against Hashaton because he is a monster. His ability is uncounterable, more or less. I mean, it's not to say that you can't counter it. You could if you had a spell that countered abilities like Stifle or Tail's End or something like that. But most people don't play this card, so you could pretty much expect that once he's in play, if you're able to discard a creature card, and pay the mana, you're going to get that ability off, more than likely. So other strengths, he makes tokens. So token doublers are definitely our friend. So more on that later. The 4/4 stats that he makes a creature may be an upgrade on a creature's regular stats. Esper Sentinel is a great example. Like, if you discard Esper Sentinel with Hashaton, put a token of it into play, all of a sudden you've got a 4/4 Esper Sentinel that everyone has to pay 4, or you draw a card. So it kind of turns your Ristic Buddy into a Fish Stick Buddy. Other strengths, he gains value from discarding. So normally a cost, right, something that is negative toward your overall game plan, becomes a positive thing. And there's tremendous value in that, right? Because usually when you're having to discard a card, you're getting some sort of benefit for that, right? You either drew a card because you're playing a looter, or you got to pay a lower cost as a result. So if we're getting value when we're discarding, that means we're turning a negative into a positive. And isn't that what life's about? All your creatures become zombies. So typically this is good. It means that we can play synergy cards like Roaming Throne and really benefit from them. When all of our powerful creatures are now zombies in addition to their other types, doubling their triggers can be extremely powerful, right? But this is not the kind of thing, I think, in my opinion, you want to lean too hard into. Like, it may be tempting to play Anthem effects or other sort of zombie synergy cards. I'd say like don't lean too hard into this. Maybe play one or two cards that benefit from it, but I wouldn't make this part of your central game plan if you want the deck to be just powerful and consistent. Like, for example, I wouldn't play Banner of Kinship in this deck, even though it would be good, right? If you've got a board of tokens, they're all zombies, you could pump them, but I think that's kind of win more, right? This is not going to help you when you're behind. And that's how I want you to think of cards that you put into your deck. Like, are they going to help you get out of a bad situation? Or are they going to help you win the game? And it may help you win the game a little bit faster, but I think if you had a board of tokens that were going to get buffed from Banner of Kinship, you're probably going to win that game anyway. So this deck encourages looter effects, and I think I see that as a very much a strength because looter effects are tremendously powerful to improve the consistency of your deck. It basically does several things for you, right? It bolsters reanimation strategies, which we know Esper loves. It gives us better card selection, allows us to see more of our good cards more often, right? So I've heard a lot of newer players complain about either having to discard or getting milled. And, oftentimes I'll see, for example, people say like, they'll have an option to get a free loot on something. Uh, when I say loot, I mean draw one and discard one. That's what we typically call a loot effect in Magic. And I can't think of what the situation was, but I know on a couple of occasions I've seen a player have an option to take a free loot, and they chose not to do it because they said like, I like everything in my hand. I don't want to discard a card. This mentality doesn't make a lot of sense to me because you're always going to be able to discard your worst card. And if your hand is so wonderful, then fine. Maybe the card you drew next is going to be your worst card, but I still think it's almost always beneficial to take a loot effect. And the more you have in your deck, you'll find the more consistent your game plan is. This also allows us to play less lands more safely. We've got an abundance of 2 mana loot effects in this deck, pretty much all of the best ones that exist, and several of the like even medium ones. And this means like a 2-land hand is probably going to get us there as long as we have one of these loot effects because it means we're going to be drawing an extra card every turn. Not netting a card, but we're going to be seeing an extra card every turn. So you can keep a land light hand with a deck like this and not be too stressed out about it, about missing a land drop. And then, I've saved the best for last. The two biggest strengths of Hashaton are number one, he allows you to cheat in powerful creatures. You can pay 3 mana for any creature, more or less. That is extremely strong. You can cheat out some huge and scary stuff. It will only be a 4/4 regardless of what the stats are, and you won't get any cast triggers. So no cheating in and getting the triggers off of any of the big Eldrazi, for example. Although you still do get whatever attack triggers and other stuff like Annihilator that they may have. So I'm not choosing to run any Eldrazi, but you certainly could. And then last but definitely not least is this ability allows you to play creatures and threats at instant speed. Now, he does make tokens that are tapped, so you can't really cheat in a surprise blocker unless you choose to run something like Amulet of Vigor, which I considered, but I ultimately determined wasn't worth, kind of taking away from the main focus of this deck. I think in general, the way the game plan is going to go with Hashaton is you're going to get a looter effect out, and right before it's your turn, so at the end step of the opponent right before you, you're going to tap a looter to draw and discard a card and drop in a creature. And yeah, it enters tapped, but you're about to untap anyway, so not a huge deal. I think that's going to be a very typical play pattern with this deck. We're going to talk more about how to play the deck and, again, run through some practice hands before we get into the game, but I want to finish talking about, so that was mainly the strengths that I found for Hashaton. I do want to talk about his weaknesses too and how we're going to shore those up. So the first biggest weakness, in my opinion, is that he's got no built-in protection. For all the talk of, oh, everything's got ward nowadays, he's got nothing, right? He's just a 1/3, and that's it. No ward, no hexproof, no shroud, nothing. So, if someone wants to kill him, they're probably going to be able to kill him. although he's cheap, the ability is a little bit mana intensive, right? So in order to play and use him on the same turn, we need at least 5 mana, and that doesn't count any costs that we have to pay in order to discard a card. And speaking of that, he another weakness of Hashaton is that he is very reliant on having a discard outlet. We're running quite a lot, but if you happen to not draw one in a game, or if your main one gets removed and you just don't have another one, you're kind of doing nothing because he just won't work if you don't have a way to discard a creature on the regular. Tokens that he makes are a little bit more fragile than regular creatures. A bounce effect kills a token, so you have to keep an eye out for that. And lastly, like he doesn't do anything immediately. Like normally you want your creatures to have some sort of impact on the board right when they come in, even if it's not an ETB, maybe some sort of static effect or some sort of just big power and toughness or ability to block well. He doesn't have any of that. He's cheap, right? So you can just run him out and hope he survives. But he's not doing anything the second you play him. And that is a weakness. Now, can we work around it? Of course we can. So what's the general game plan with Hashaton? Well, number one is we have to get a discard outlet into play or in our hand. So I'm going to switch over to my types and tags in my grouping here. So on Knoxfield, if you just click on the group section and go to types and tags, you can see these. There's going to be a lot. I like to be very specific with the way I tag cards, but just try to deal with it, parse through it, and like don't worry about the ones that you don't need to see at the time. So let's scroll down to self-mill and discard and see. I'm going to sort by mana value so we can see kind of how the curve looks for each category. Let's head down to self-mill and discard and take a look at what we've got here. So 20 different ways to discard a card in this deck. So that is, if you're doing the math at home, that's 1/5 of the deck. So you should be able to find it. Although I will say that some of these fall under the self-mill side in the Surveil lands, Takanuma. These aren't going to help you, these 4 lands. I think everything else here does. So if we subtract out those 4, then we've got 16 sources. Some of them are one-time effects like Frantic Search. Frantic Search, by the way, one of, if not the best card in the deck. It's basically a free way to discard 2 cards because you pay 3, but then you untap 3 lands. So at worst, you're breaking even. But at best, if you've got a bounce land in play or an ancient tomb or any land that can produce more than 1 mana, then you're netting mana. So I tapped a bounce land and 2 islands, cast a Frantic Search for 3, but I have 1 mana floating because I tapped 3 lands, but I made 4 mana. And then I untapped those 3 lands. So now I have that 1 mana floating that I made basically for free. So Frantic Search, excellent card. Unclear Cryptologist. This is the only 1 mana looter in the game that I'm aware of. 1 blue for a 0/1 looter. But man, so good in this deck. One of the best cards in this deck. So not one to skip out on. This is a really good card in this deck. And then the land sources we have that can discard are great too. Spymaster's Vault and Gaia Reach Sanitarium, because they're very hard to deal with. Like, opponents can't interact with these cards. Sure, they can strip mine it or wasteland it, but these lands are not threatening enough that they're likely to do that. And if they do, it's okay. We've got tons of other sources. So these are just sort of incidental things we can run in the deck that help us get there on a land, which is really helpful to have sometimes. The best discard outlets, though, are the ones that are basically free to use and that are very cheap. Because if you think about, like, how do we want the first 3 turns to go with a deck like this? He costs 2 mana, right? So if let's say we want to risk it and run him out on turn 2, which I think, depends whether or not your opponents are aware of how powerful he is. If there's been some buzz about this commander and they're saying, oh, that guy's really strong, then I'd be a little bit more concerned about just running him out on turn 2 because I think he's at risk of being removed. However, if you want to just go for it, run him out on turn 2, the only way I would do that is if you have a way to activate him immediately on turn 3. And that is not so easy to do unless there's really only a few cards that can do it, right? Frantic Search is one, because assuming we played Hashaton on turn 2, A frantic search on turn 3 means we could draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. The 2 cards we discarded, if one of them was a creature, we can pay the 2 and a blue then because we've untapped 3 lands, and we can make the token copy of it. So Frantic Search, excellent card for that reason. Putrid Imp is another way we can do it. If we drop a Putrid Imp or the Underworld Cookbook, either of these cards on turn 1, not Tortured Existence though, notably because that cost a black to activate. So with these two, since they can discard a card for free, we could play them on turn 1. We could play Hashaton on turn 2. Again, this is even riskier at this point because now they see the discard outlet that you have on board. Then you play your commander. So any astute opponent is going to be like, oh shit, we're about to see a turn 3 Phyllis Broker of Blood or whatever the worst fear that they can imagine is. So you either need balls of steel or just a lot of luck to try one of these plays. But, sometimes risky plays pay off. So if you drop Future Champ or Underworld Cookbook turn 1 and Hashaton turn 2, boom, you can activate them turn 3 by discarding a card for free and then paying the 2 and a blue to make the token copy of it. Typically, though, I'd say if you want to be safe, what you should do is wait until you've got 5 mana available, drop him for 2, and then have the 3 that you can use him at least once right away, even if he gets removed. Alternatively, you can have some free protection. I'm not playing many free counterspells, just the Fierce Guardianship. You could certainly, if you want to power up this deck, and I'll go over some upgrade options at the end of the video, you could certainly throw in Force of Negation, Force of Will, Pact Negation, whatever you want to make this deck more powerful. And there's tons of more powerful creatures you can run. I'm shooting for around a power level 7 to 8 with no infinites. That's typically what I do. But there are a lot of ways you can build this, either for cheaper and a little less powerful, for more expensive and more powerful. The game's wide open for you with Hashaton. So yeah, tons and tons of discard outlets. You got to make sure you got at least one though. One of these looters is great because, like I talked about at the beginning, this is just a great way to ensure that you're set up for success in the early turns. So mulliganing for at least 2 mana and one of these 2 mana looters is a pretty good way to go, I would say. That's going to get you safely to a solid game plan. I'd say I'd classify this as like a mid-range slash control deck, in that I think the way you most of the time want to play it is just develop some like incremental value. Don't come out as the first threat. I think in a deck like this, if you do that, it's pretty easy to deal with your commander. It's pretty easy to deal with, even if you put down the scariest creature in your deck, it's still only a 4/4 token. So there are a lot of ways that opponents can deal with that. And then if you've emerged as the arch enemy, but then you don't really have any gas to like back that up, it's going to be a tough spot for you. So I'd say in general, we have a lot of catch-up mechanics. Let's talk about the removal package in the deck. It might be a little different than you're used to seeing, but since it's so important for us to run creatures, I've decided to skip over some of the more normal removal you might see in an Asper deck. Stuff like Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile. I'm not running that stuff because we have some like amazing creature options that can deal with tough boards. Getting out a free, not free, right? It'll always cost 3 mana, but getting out an Archfiend of Ifnir, it can be GG for opponents. This creature is just such a bitch to deal with. Anytime you discard a card, it's a -1 counter on every creature your opponents control. It doesn't affect you. It's just a major headache for opponents to deal with. If you're feeling like extra spiky, you could run Toxrill, who does a similar thing, except every turn and without having to do anything. So that's an upgrade option that you could take if you're so inclined. But a lot of these cards are going to really just put a damper on what opponents are trying to do. And if we look at the board wipes we're playing, we've got 6 different board wipes, which is pretty high. Some of these are a little bit conditional and they're not necessarily going to wipe the whole board. For example, Massacre Worm, Elish Norn, and Archfiend of Ifnir are not going to be necessarily a complete board wipe, but practically speaking, these are going to get you there and they're going to deal with opponents' boards well enough that I think you'll be okay. And then we've got Raise the Palisade, which is another kind of nod to the fact that we make only zombies. So this just bounces all non-zombies, and that's a very powerful one-sided sort of board wipe slash wrath effect. So back to the game plan. Step one, get a discard outlet and play, right? We want ideally one that's free to activate and repeatable. Step two, play the commander. Like I mentioned, turn two, you can do it if you want, but it's a little dangerous. I'd say wait until you have a way to use his ability at least once, until you're ready to play him. I think in general, the way you want the first few turns to go is set up a looter, find a board wipe effect, and try to clear the board, then play your commander, pass the turn with 3 mana up, and activate him right before it comes back to you. I think that is the way you're going to win most games. And then once you've got a value piece in play that's drawing you a lot of cards, like something like Consecrated Sphinx, Sphinx of the Second Sun, Vilis, any of these cards are really going to get you there quite quickly. Agent of Treachery is one too that we'll talk about a little bit later. So one thing you might have noticed looking at my deck list is that I'm not playing any cards. So even though we've got ways to draw a lot of cards like I just covered, I'm not playing any ways that give us no maximum hand size. Now, you might think that is an oversight, but actually, what you may not have realized is that discarding to hand size is a free discard outlet. Um, One of the first games I played with this deck, I had the One Ring in play. I've since cut the One Ring, but it's certainly good in the deck, so you can play it if you'd like. But I had the One Ring in play, and I kept drawing over 7 in my turn, having to discard, and then just using those discards to trigger my commander's ability. So that is a great way if you don't have any other way to get a card discarded. That's going to work, right? I love bounce lands, these lands from the original Ravnica that come in tap, make 2 colors, and cause you to bounce a land when they come into play. Not only are these excellent at resetting like your MDFCs, these modal dual-faced cards that can come in as a land on the other side, but the front side does something powerful in a spell version. So these can get these back into your hands, the bounce lands, can allow you to replay these MDFCs, and that's really powerful. But what they can also do is force a discard, right? And so usually this is a disadvantage. You might see it happen on turn 2, where, either you or an opponent only has a bounce land they can play on turn 2. They play a land on turn 1, don't have a play. They play a bounce land turn 2, bounce their land from turn 1, and now all of a sudden they have 8 cards in hand and all their lands are tapped. So they have to discard to hand size. So normally that's a bad thing, but in a deck like this, where we can put something either powerful in our graveyard so we can reanimate it with like a reanimate and animate dead, don't forget, like, this stuff's still going to be in your graveyard and you can still get it back in play via reanimation shenanigans, even without using Hashaton's ability. So that's one option. Another option is to hold your bounce land until the turn you're ready to discard and use Hashaton. So keep that in mind. That's a very potent and powerful play. And that's an option that's really going to help you when you can't develop a discard outlet in any other way. So I want to talk about some specific cards of note, specifically creatures and really powerful interactions in this deck. So I'm going to switch back to regular, go over to our sort by name. So the first couple of cards actually I want to talk about are Sphinx of the Second Sun and Shadow of the Second Sun, which is the new, this is an enchantment aura. It's an ode to Sphinx of the Second Sun, which came out first. But these both have the same effect. So what does it do? Well, that's the $1,000,000 question. It is quite confusing, so let me talk you through it and explain how these cards work. Let's take Shadow of the Second Sun as the example, since I'm already on it here. So first of all, it's an aura, an enchant player. So you target yourself with this, right? And then it says, at the beginning of enchanted player, which is me, at the beginning of my upkeep, at the beginning of my post-combat main phase, there's an additional beginning phase after this phase. So before we get into anything else, let me explain technically what this is. So at the beginning of my post-combat main phase, my post-combat main is my second main, right? So it goes untap, upkeep, draw, first main, combat, second main, end step. So this says at the beginning of my second main phase, so right after combat, there's an additional beginning phase after this phase. Now that after this phase part is the part that people usually miss. And that's really the critical part. So what this means is it's creating a delayed trigger that's going to happen after this phase. And this phase is the second main. So we move to our second main phase. If Shadow of the Second Sun is in play, it creates then, right at the beginning of the second main, a delayed trigger that will happen right afterwards. So as soon as we attempt to move to end step, this is going to instead bring us to our additional beginning phase. And as noted in the parentheses here, the beginning phase includes the untap, upkeep, and draw steps. Okay? So what does this mean? It means that as long as we had this in play before we went to combat, then when we move out of combat, it creates a delayed trigger that when we move through our second main phase to our end step, or attempt to move to our end step, we instead go to untap, upkeep, draw, and then to end step. Practically, this means that you untap all your lands, you untap all your creatures, everything untaps, right? You get another upkeep phase, which typically doesn't matter, but you never know. If you've got something that triggers on upkeep, then it can matter. If you're playing the One Ring, this can be a little bit dangerous because you're taking extra damage every upkeep from your burden counters. You are getting to untap the ring, though, every time, though. So I think in general, it's still quite good, but you just have to be careful if you're at low life when you have this in play. And you get another draw. The big thing is untapping all of your lands and creatures and stuff, though. This is very powerful for any deck that can use their mana on others' turns, because once you untap, upkeep, draw, you don't get another main phase. You can't play any creatures in your main phase. You can't play any land. You can't do anything. You just move to end step right after that. Discard hand size, and then your turn's over. So really, before you play this, or before you play Sphinx of the Second Sun, you want to have something to do with your mana on others' turns. And you know what we can do with our mana on others' turns? Use Hashaton's ability. So let's say I am going into turn 6. I play my 6th land. I have a looter in play. I have Hashaton in play. Let's say I use the looter, draw a card, discard a card. I discard Sphinx of the Second Sun. And then I say, I'm going to pay 3 mana and make a token copy of it. So I have a tapped Sphinx of the Second Sun. I have a tapped looter. I have 3 lands tapped. Now, if I do nothing else, I move to combat, I have no attacks. I move to second main, the delayed trigger is created. Then I go to end step, everything untaps, upkeep, I draw another card. Basically, I got the Sphinx of the Second Sun out for free, and I get to draw an extra card. So that's the power of this card and the Shadow of the Second Sun in this deck. This is one of the best decks for these 2 cards. I would not skip these. They're extremely good, especially the Sphinx, because the Sphinx you can play on turn 3. And as long as you play it on your turn and no one can disrupt it before you move to end step, then you're golden. One thing I want to warn you about with both of these cards is you cannot play them in your second main phase or it won't work, because they have to be in existence when you begin your second main phase, or that delayed trigger will not be created. So trust me, if you've seen me play, I've done this, even though I've warned everyone about it, I've done it multiple times on camera. It's very embarrassing. I'm like, go to combat first, because you know what normally happens is I trick myself into attacking first, because I'm like, oh, I want to get value because I know my creatures are going to untap, right? So I want to get value and go to combat, because there's no reason not to attack. Normally, like, I have a 1/1. Let's say I have an Esper Sentinel, right? Or just Hashaton or whatever. And I'm like, I have a free attack on someone. I'm like, I might as well just get it in 1 damage before I play my Shadow of the Second Sun, because I know it's going to untap anyway. And the stupid thing is, like, you can still do that. You just need to play the Shadow of the Second Sun first. But, for some reason, the way my brain works is like, no, you might as well just go to combat first. And I think, the better player you are, the more you have that mentality of like, I should play stuff in my second main. So a card like this kind of breaks that rule and makes it tough on you. So just be warned, that's a trap you can fall into. I've done it. It sucks, but whatever. Osier Talk. Man, has there ever been a better deck for this card? I don't think so. This card is absolutely nuts. If you didn't catch my first gameplay video on Hashaton, please check that out. It is a pleasure to watch how powerful this card is. Hey, making 3 of the 4/4s that you're discarding, turns out that's pretty good. And man, this is a really good one. So it's worth considering hardcasting this because if it dies, then it comes back as a land and you can just flip it back over. But man, if you can just like do this on end step, discard him right before it's your turn, you're about to untap, no one has a way to remove it at instant speed, then all of a sudden you're making 3 of whatever your best creature is. Now, if you've got legendaries, it's not going to work quite so well, right? Because like making 3 Villas is not going to do anything for you. But making 3 Kokusho the Evening Stars is. Because although you're going to lose the other 2 that you make, for each one that dies, everyone's going to lose 5 life and you're going to gain 5. So that means the 2 that die cause everyone to lose 10 and you gain 30 if you've got 4 players in the game. So that is a way to win the game. Another phenomenal card to combo with Ozurtalk, and I pulled off this magic in that game I just mentioned earlier, is you've got Ozurtalk in play, you drop in an Agent of Treachery. I'll let that sink in for a moment. But if you haven't realized, what will happen is you'll get 3 Agent of Treacheries, you'll get to gain control of 3 different permanents, and then you'll move to your end step and, hey, I control 3 permanents that I don't own because I just stole 3 different ones. I'll draw 3 cards. Oh, wait, but I have 3 Agent of Treacheries, so I will draw 9 cards. Yeah, that happened. And oh man, did it feel good. And, never hurt anyone except for your opponents who will be in a bloody mess afterwards. It never hurt anyone to play 3 Garys at the same time. Doing at minimum, well, I guess you had to have had your commander in play, so that's a black pip. Ozurtalk's no black pip. So at minimum, you're doing 7 devotion times 3, 21 damage to everyone. And that's if you have no other black pips in play. So Gary is a win con for sure. And yeah, there's tons of other like great ways to win. You won't be lacking ways to win in this deck. It's quite easy if your opponents don't just scoop. Abyssal Harvester. This is a new one from Foundations. I love this card. I'm trying it out in every deck, but like this may be one of the most perfect decks for it because anytime a creature goes to the graveyard from anywhere, it doesn't matter. You could discard it, you could mill it, you could have it, it could die. Whatever happens, you can tap Abyssal Harvester to exile that creature, and then you make a token copy of it. Except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types, and you only get to keep like 1 set of nightmares at a time. So if you've got an Ozurtalk in play, I'm not going to keep saying this, but like if you do, Abyssal Harvester benefits from that as well, because you're going to make 3 times the tokens that you exile. And this doesn't just work on your creatures. This works on anyone's creatures. Anyone has a creature die, yoink, you get it. Pretty good stuff. Clever Impersonator. This is one of my favorite cards. This card is like shenanigans incarnate right here. It can enter as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield, and being able to drop this in at instant speed using your commander can just create so many tricks that can do so many things, and it's just such a powerful option to have in the deck. I already talked about Archfiend of Ifnir, but man, this card is absolutely a beating. Not a card to play if you want this deck to be like fairly low powered. It's similarly oppressive to something like Toxrill, so I would treat it as a very powerful card and not play it if you want the deck to be a little bit more medium powered. Last but not least, we've got a couple of bangers in Archon of Cruelty, the preeminent reanimation target for decks that can't play the new Atraxa. Archon of Cruelty, ending games with your opponent's rage quitting since 2021. The last card I'm going to talk about is this new guy from Duskmourn Commander, Metamorphosis Fanatic. So he's a 6-mana 4/4 with lifelink. When he enters, you can return any creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, but it enters with a lifelink counter. And he's got Miracle for 1 and a black. So just a reminder, in case you don't remember what Miracle does, Miracle says, if this is the first card, actually, let's switch over to the regular version so we can see. All right, so Miracle says, you may cast this card for its Miracle cost. When you draw it, if it's the first card you drew that turn. So if this is the first card you drew on any turn, doesn't have to be your turn, but normally you're drawing on your turn for your turn, right? So if this is on top of your deck, you draw it, you have to remember to reveal it, because if you don't and you stick it into your hand, then that's cheating. You can no longer prove that it was the card on top of your library. But if you do remember, and that's why it's got that sunburst frame around it, so you remember and don't just shove it into your hand. But if you draw this card as your first card, you go, oh, miracle. Just reveal it to everyone, and then you get to pay 2 instead of 6. You also get to play it right then. Normally, you can't play a spell during your draw step, which is like when you drew Metamorphosis Fanatic. But Miracle allows you to break timing and play it whenever you draw it. It creates that trigger that lets you play it. So this also means that if it's on top of your deck and you use a looter on an opponent's turn, you can draw and play it right then at instant speed, reanimating any creature from your graveyard and making this 4/4 lifelink. So that's a great combo right there. Just having looter effects and being able to use them on opponent's turn. Every now and then you're just going to draw this off the top and be like, oh, sweet, that's awesome. But you could also rig it, right? You can play Imperial Seal, you can play Vampiric Tutor, stick this on top of your deck. Hey, guess what? You're going to draw it next turn. But I'm not running any tutors because I'm trying to cut tutors from most decks, but they certainly are at home in this deck if you want to run them and you feel like that's the meta that you play with, go for it. But one way I am cheating with this card is with Vora Stronghold. So this is a sweet land and it's pretty expensive, so you absolutely don't need this. And I'm going to talk about budget options at the end of the video. But for 1 and a black, you can tap this to put a creature from your graveyard on top of your library. Guess what? Pretty good combo with Metamorphosis Fanatic, really. So that's pretty much it. I mean, the deck is just a reanimation deck with a little bit of spice, or maybe the other way around. It's a lot of spice with a little bit of reanimation thrown in. And, it's an Esper control deck. It's got a lot of board wipes. It's got counter spells. It's got some spot removal. It's got like a little bit of ramp. These aren't really the colors for ramp, but man, this is just a very powerful deck that can do things out of nowhere. It can do it at like instant speed, which is always really strong. And it has been one of the most fun decks I've played in a long time. So absolutely recommend you check it out. It's such a blast. So I've already duplicated my main deck list and updated this to cheapest by going to this update to cheapest. This is based on TCG player prices as of today. But if you want to bring down the price tag from $2,800, you can actually do so. I'm going to sort by price. And I have price added by going into advanced and just including this extra data. And then I'm going to sort by price, and you'll see that actually, so $260 of this is these sideboard options that I have in the sideboard that, don't really count toward the deck total. But then just these 5 cards right here are what? Like, this is like $1,600 of land. And you do not need these 5 lands to play this deck. In fact, if you took out all of these lands, which are almost $2,000, and just play basics, the deck's, of course, it's going to be worse. Like, having an expensive mana base is going to gain you percentage points. Magic is pay to win, period. If you pay more, you're going to win more. That's just a fact. However, that doesn't mean that you have to do that, and that it doesn't mean you can't win games anyway. And cutting these 5 land are not going to lower your winning percentage by that much. They are going to lower your deck total to under $1,000. And you don't even need to be playing like the other very expensive cards. Everything here can be subbed out. And, I've thrown together what I think are a good combination of cards and synergies, but there are a lot of ways to build this that are all going to be powerful and fun. So try those out if you want. And then if you want to power up this deck, do, like I said, add in some tutors, add in some nastier creatures. You could play these Jingataxias Praetors. You could play Notion Thief is great in this deck. Opposition Agent is amazing in this deck. Razaketh, Toxrill. Like, there are a lot of options to make this deck stronger and more powerful. You can add just faster mana. It always makes a deck stronger. So that's basically all I have. I'm going to run through some practice hands now, and then we're going to play a game and see if we can get Hashaton and make some zombies. So let's switch to my main deck list so I get the versions I like. And then I'm going to hit playtest, and we're going to run through some practice hands. So if you haven't done this with me before, my recommendation is that you pause the video, make the decision yourself. Would you keep this hand? Let's assume we don't know who we're going against, that we're in a power level 7 to 8 game, and that this is your opening 7. What do you think? Do you keep this hand? I mean, we've got a discard outlet, which is what we want, and a turn one, no less, right? So we could risk running our commander out on turn 2 with this hand, and then drop it in Archon of Cruelty on turn 3. And that's going to be very good for us. It's going to be really bad for some opponent that has the unluckiness of running up against an Archon of Cruelty on turn 3. And even if they remove it, we still get the ETB where we're drawing a card, we're gaining 3 life. That all being said, this hand is definitely risky. If our commander is removed on turn 2, if we go for that play, or if our Archon is dealt with and it didn't really draw us anything that great and we just draw land from here on out, that could be really bad for us because the Underworld Cookbook, while it is a very good discard outlet, it's not actually drawing us cards. So this hand is very reliant on what we draw going forward. I think this is a really tough one to start, to be honest. I think I might go with another 7 on this. I could see keeping it. We've got really good mana. We've got the Volrath Stronghold to get Archon back. I just feel like we could do a little better than this. I'd rather not rely on the risky run our commander out on turn 2, hope it lives play. I'd rather find something that can set us up a little bit more for the mid game and maybe try not to become the initial arch enemy. If you said you would keep this hand, I think that's totally valid. But I'm going to go to a second 7. All right, pause it. This is our second 7. Do you keep this hand? Yikes. Deck. We drew 6 land here and no discard outlets, nothing to do. This is definitely a mulligan. We're going down to 6. All right, here's our 6. Pause it. Do you keep this hand? Can't keep this hand either. How about, hey deck, how about we get like either not all land or not no land? That would be cool. We have 1 land, right? This could be a land. If we could rely on drawing a blue source, I would definitely keep this, but we cannot rely on that. Don't risk it. Just go to 5. Going to 5, not that bad. Seriously. A lot of times it's an advantage. Like, people don't have their eyes on you if you went to 5. I'm not saying it's good, but like, make the best of it. All right, here's our 5. Do we keep this 5? Heck yeah, this is a great hand. See, this 5 is so much better than our 6 and either of our 7s. If I had the option, if I just, like, if we backed up and I saw all 4 of these hands, I would choose this one. Even if, assuming this one meant you could only keep 5, the other one meant you can only keep 6, the other's 7. I probably would have kept the 7, the first 7 we were considering, but I think this 5 is going to get us there. This is a really good 5. Not only can we discard the Shadow Grange Archfiend for its madness cost, but we've got a looter, we've got an animate dead. Like, this is an excellent hand. So the question is, what do we bottom here? And that's tough. I think we can bottom the Bitter Triumph because we've got a discard outlet. Normally, this is a great card. Like, any card that can let you discard, like Frantic Surge, like at instant speed without people knowing about it, can be really, really good. But I just think, like, we have to get rid of 2 cards here. So what do we do? So let's do this one, and let's do it's tough. The Arcane Signet? I think so. We could do the Animate Dead. I think the Arcane Signet is correct. Tough one, though. The Animate Dead is a valid choice, too. All right, let's see how this plays out. Okay, so we are running the full contingent of Surveil lands, so let's keep that in mind when we play our fetch land. Since we have no other thing to play on turn 1, let's grab something. I'm not even going to bother fetching. We'll assume this is a surveil land. I'm going to surveil one. Frantic Search. I think we keep that on top. Let's go to our next turn. And sorry for the foreign language version. This is just my preferred version, but it's 2 mana or 3 mana blue instant, draw 2, discard 2, then untap 3 lands. Frantic Search. All right, so we're going to shock in something, doesn't really matter, and we'll play Vohar, which is a leader. All right, next turn. All right, what do we do here? So it depends, right? If we have, I think what we do is just play a land and then, like, let's shock in the Godless Shrine and then pass. And then leave the option open to madness out the Shadow Green Archfiend by using Vohar. So we allow opponents to play their stuff. If there are enough threats that we find it worth it to run out the Shadow Range, we do it. I think if we could hit at least 2 creatures, it's worth it. Especially since we don't necessarily have anything better to do. We could play Frantic Search, but I'd probably rather save that right now. So I think what I would do is start off by using Vohar. So we'll draw a card. Ooh, that is a good draw. So we could just discard Consecrated Sphinx and animate Dead It next turn. I think that's the play. Yeah. And then if that's countered or whatever, we have Takenuma to get Consecrate Sphinx back, and we can discard it with Hashaton on a future turn. So let's do that. So we discard Consecrate Sphinx. Opponents are like, fuck, why'd you do that? You're like, it's the worst card in my hand. Of course, right? Next turn. And now we drew Archon. Hilarious. So it's like, look how good this hand ended up being relative to one of those other hands. This is why you keep mulliganing. And like, it's not always going to work out, but I'd say like, trust your deck, find a good hand. Even if you don't, like, going to 5 is so much better than keeping a bad 7. It's not even like close. All right, so let's just play the Takenuma. Don't worry about saving it for value. We can always bounce it back to our hand with a bounce land later. So we'll run out. We could loot first and try to find a counterspell, but I don't think we need to do that. Let's just run out the Animate Dead. See if opponents have anything. If not, we pass the turn. Opponent draws. We draw 2. And this hand plays itself from there. We can get Hashaton online next turn. We can activate him right away with Frantic Search. Everything's coming up Millhouse here. All right, here's our first 7. Do we keep this hand? Definitely. This hand is great. If you're not familiar with Tithe, it's basically 1 mana white, draw 2. Yeah, you can only draw planes, but you get any planes, not just basics. You can get your dual lands, your shock lands, your surveil lands, anything with a planes type. So, and we've got a turn 1 Esper Sentinel. So, man, looks great. We've got land for days with the Tithe and the Witch Enchanter, and Roaming Thread's excellent, Archon's excellent. We have it like one of the best discard outlets in our deck. This hand, perfect. All right, drew planes, so let's play that. Let's play the Esper. Easy peasy. Next turn. All right, Psychic Frog, great draw as well. Unfortunately, like, kind of hard to play with that planes, but that's okay. So what do we do here? I'll draw like 1 extra card off Esper this turn. That's usually how I do it in playtesting. Just play it very conservatively. So like 1 card every 2 turns or something like that. You might draw more than that. You might draw less than that, but I think 1 card every 2 turns is a reasonable expectation. All right, so I think we just play the Prismatic Vista here, plan to use Tithe. And by the way, you can sack the Vista and Tithe right now while you have 1 land. So keep that in mind as a play if you need it. But normally, as long as you didn't go first, you'll be fine to Tithe as soon as the player in first position plays their 2nd land. So end step, we'll draw a card from Esper Sentinel on this turn. And then we'll cast Tithe, we'll grab 2, we're going to grab a land from our Prismatic Vista first, which looks like we want, I guess we want black because our commander costs black. So that's going to enter. And then we're going to search up 2 planes of our choice. So what are we doing next turn? Because if we had a spare mana, which I don't think we're going to, we could get a Surveil land, but I don't think we want to do that. So let's just get the 2 white dual lands. And if you're not playing these, just get the 2 shock lands or whatever. So it's Tundra and white, black is Scotland. Okay, let's go to hand. And then we're going to close and shuffle, and then it's our turn. Draw for turn. We'll play the blue land because we need it. Now here we have 3 options. We could play Unfulfilled Desires, we could play our commander, or we could play Psychic Frog. I think Psychic Frog is correct. And the reason I said that we couldn't grab a Surveil land is because we needed blue. If we had blue and could play the Psychic Frog, I would have grabbed 1 Surveil land, but we couldn't do that. So we could play the Unfulfilled Desires to use our mana better, but I think the Frog is better because we can draw cards, start drawing cards with it. If it hits someone, we draw a card, right? And it's going to be probably possible to do that on our next turn. You can always discard cards to pump it, so it's not really very safe to block. And we could give it flying if we had 1 more card in our graveyard. So it's going to be able to get through. I don't know. I think they're both valid. I like developing the frog because, well, I mean, on the other hand, like, we already have a valuable creature in play, so like it's not like, opponents may, it depends what, if there are a lot of other good creatures in play, I'd probably lean towards playing the Unfulfilled Desires because then it's, because if you play the Psychic Frog, it's going to be tempting for an opponent to want to board wipe if there are other good creatures on the board. So that's how I'd probably make this decision. But, it's probably 50-50, which is better. It doesn't really matter. Let's play the 3 mana card. All right, we drew a Circular Logic, which would have made it better to play the Psychic Frog because we'd have a free discard outlet, but that's okay. I think here, at this point we could play our commander, but we still can't activate him right away, right? So I think we wait 1 more turn to do that. We could just develop Roaming Throne here. Not a terrible play, to be honest. If it gets removed, not a huge deal. If it doesn't, man, we're set up for a really good turn, right? So we play Roaming Throne named Zombies. And now, to see double Hashatons. Whenever you discard, you may pay 2 to create I think this doubles this, because this is a trigger. When you discard, so yeah, I think we could pay 6 with Roaming Throne in play to get 2 triggers of this. So not something we can do next turn, but the following turn, if we have 6 land, we could do that. So really powerful option. But like the main thing is we're going to get double ETBs on Archon of Cruelty. We're going to get double ETBs on, Agent Treachery, Archon of Cruelty, Witch Enchanter. Like, yeah, Roaming Throne's very strong here. So we'll draw 1 off Esper. We'll go to our next turn. All right, unfortunately, we didn't draw land, so I think we have to run out the Witch Enchanter so that we can drop our commander. Oh, we don't have the free discard, though. So it almost certainly would have been right to play Psychic Frog, I think. Because now, yeah, I screwed up. But you can imagine, like, if I hadn't screwed up and played this, then we would have been in a really powerful spot here. But even if you did screw up, it's fine. Just, like, slow down 1 more turn. Like, see how strongly this deck is going to recover. You're going to end step play Ozurtok, and then you're going to, on your turn, drop in an Archon of Cruelty. If the Roaming Throne is still alive, then you're going to get 3 Archon of Cruelties, each of which triggers twice. So you're going to get 6 ETBs on Archon of Cruelty. Yeah, seems pretty busted. Let's go for another hand. All right, pause it. And tell me, do you keep this hand on your opening 7? No, you shouldn't keep this hand. I think we can do better. This is a fine hand. If this was our second 7, I might keep it, but we have 5 land, we have no plays till turn 3. We've got a discard outlet on our land, but this is like expensive to use. It costs 6 mana. Basically, you need 6 land to be able to use this in conjunction with Hashaton, so this hand's not good enough. Don't keep a hand like this on your opening 7. Alright, pause it. And tell me, do you keep this one? Heck yeah, we keep this one. Looks very good. We only have 2 land, but we can fetch a Surveil turn 1, so that lets us have another chance at seeing a land. And then we drop Likeness Looter first before Felwar Stone, because unless we drew a land. If we drew a land, then I still think we drop Likeness Looter, because we just want to get the looter online. And then eventually we ramp. Well, if we drew a land, we could play Felwar Stone, play turn 3 Smothering Tide. That's probably the play, actually. So, yeah, let's see how it goes. Draw. We drew another looter, so that's okay. We have backup if we need it. We'll play the Scalding Tarn. We'll fetch a Surveil land. Let's just grab it so we know what colors we have. So we have to get a blue, so we want the blue black one. So we don't have black. Let's another City Sewers. Comes in. We Surveil. Goes to Pilfer. Really good card. I just don't think we need it in this hand, so let's spin it. We're looking for a land. So this got us the Surveil land got us 1 card closer to a land drop. And there it is. That's the power of the Surveil lands. You just witnessed it. We drew a land this turn instead of not drawing land. It didn't matter this turn, but imagine if it had. So here we play Tundra, drop Felwar Stone, and then we know we're going to land Smothering Tides the following turn, and it's on with Donkey Kong after that. All right, I'm ready. I'm excited. This deck is so fun. Let's play a game. Poor opponents. I'm sorry, guys. Good game, though. Sorry, I shouldn't be cocky. Let's see what happens. Enjoy. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay.
Is everyone ready?
I'm ready whenever.
Yeah, I'll keep.
Okay, so looks like we're all good. We'll start us off. Good luck and have fun. Draw. I will play a Prismatic Vista, crack it for a Plains, and we'll play an Esper Sentinel.
I'll draw. They have Verdant Catacombs, sack for a Surveil land, and pass.
We'll draw. I will play Legion Stronghold and Inner's Tap, and I'll pass.
Draw. I'll play a command tower, and then I'll tap the command tower for a Soul Ring, and then I'll tap the Soul Ring for a Ornithopter, and then I'll pass.
Thanks. Take it you're not paying for Esper.
I am not.
All right. Untap. Keep draw. I will play a Flooded Strand, and I'll pass.
I'll draw. I'll play Snow-Covered Forest and pass.
Draw. I'll play a forest, and I'll tap 2 for Fellow Stone. Pass.
Sure.
I'm not paying
Sure,
for that.
Esper.
Yeah, I don't have any to pay for that, but I won't tap that to pay. You can have your draw.
Untap. Draw. I'll tap the command tower for a green, for an Elvish Mystic. And then I will tap the Soul Ring and the Ornithopter for a Kadama's Reach.
Not paying.
Nope. We'll put a mountain out, and
I'm going to just fetch. And in response to fetch, I'm going to cast Tide. She'll search for 2 planes, put them in my hand, so that's more lands in me.
gotcha. Mountain out, forest to hand, and then I'll pass.
Okay, I'm going to fetch in Undercity Sewers. And with the Tithe, Scrubland, and Tundra. All right, these go to hand. I'll surveil 1 off the Undercity Sewers. Leave that on top. Okay, untap, upkeep, draw. All right, a little slight Tundra. 2, what colors are you guys? Black.
I got green, red, and white.
I can tap for a blue, red, or a green. So
Okay, G, you're
Green,
black, so that's
Yeah.
5 all my colors. Thanks. Pay 2 for a Warstone. And then I'll pay 2 more for a Psychic Frog. And then I'm going to move to my end step, and I'll have to discard 1 card to hand size. So discard this Watery Grave. And I'll pass.
I'll draw. I'll play Diamond City. Enters with a shield counter.
Ooh, I like that card.
I'll tap 3. I'll just cultivate and pass there. Swamp and Forest.
Paying for Esper.
No, I can't pay.
Draw. I'm going to tap and float a green. I'm going to play my Boros Garrison. I enters tap, and I'm going to return this to my hand. I'm going to use that floating green and 2 more to play Decanter of Endless Water. I have no max hand size. I can tap to add 1 mana of any color. I'm going to pass turn.
You draw off Esper.
Yep.
untap and draw. I'll play a forest as land for turn. I'm going to tap the Soul Ring to float 2 colorless. And then I'll tap for a green to play an Elysian Caryatid, using 1 of the colorless. And then I'll use the other colorless and another green to play a Sakura Tribe Elder.
Steve.
Yeah. just go ahead and tap the Ornithopter, the command tower, and the mountain. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just going to leave that up. And then I'll pass.
Tap up, keep, draw. Play Scrubland. Tap 2. Actually, let's see. New open is. I will send. Sure, I'll send one your way, Rin and Seri.
I'll take one.
Okay, I'll draw a card on damage. Alright, and then I'll pay to cast my commander. I will move to end step, and I have 9 cards in hand, so I'm going to discard to hand size.
Shouldn't you just use this Psychic Frogs effect?
Yeah, I could, but doesn't. I suppose I should have. Doesn't matter. I'll discard Windswept Teeth and Underground Sea. I'll pass.
Untap. Draw. Snow-covered swamp. Tap 3. Fraction Arena. I'll pass.
I'll draw. I'll play a forest. I'll do a green, a red, a white, and a colorless. I'll cast my commander. And then I'm going to tap this for white. I'm going to cast Selfless Savior. It's a 1/1 dog. I can sacrifice it to give another creature indestructible time to turn. When I cast him, it's going to create a cat. I'm going to pass turn.
On your end step, I'm going to sack Steve. And we'll go and get another forest. Untap.
It's a big guy.
Draw. We'll play an island as land for turn. And then, yeah, we'll attempt to tap for 8. To bring out Maelstrom.
Pass priority.
Cast. Yeah, go ahead.
I got nothing.
Okay.
I just said pass priority. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. On cast, I'll cascade for 7 twice. Goblin, a Narcomancer, and a Monstrous Vortex.
Okay.
Let's see. Cost 1 less. Yeah, I think I'm just going to tap the Caryatid for 2 and the just for 2 green to play a Garruk's Uprising. I'll pay the 1. So I'll draw a card off of Garruk's. And then I'll move to combat. We'll swing over at you, Surf, for 7 commander.
I will take 7 commander.
And then I will move through phases and pass.
All right, on your end step, I will discard a card to the Psychic Frog to give it +1. And I'll use Hashaton's ability to make a token copy of it. It's Osier Talk Deepest Foundation. So it'll enter tapped as a 4/4 copy of it. So
What'd you
technically,
discard?
my Osier Talk, it's right here. It's the
okay.
token tripler.
Yeah, nice.
So, and then I'll go to my turn if no one has it. Untap. Keep draw. First swamp. Yes, I will send Psychic Frog at you, G, and I'll send Osier Talk at you, Ryan.
Okay.
How much?
Osier is a 4/4 frog. I guess I'll take your advice. I'll discard 1 card to give it +1/+1. So 2 on the frog, 4 on the Osier.
Didn't you use your frog to discard for Osier Talk? So it should have 2 counters, right?
Oh, it's counters. Wow, that's broken. I'm sorry. It's like my first time playing this card.
It's
Thank
pretty
you.
good. It's in standard.
Yeah.
Or modern rather. I'll take 3.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll take 4.
That's why I was wondering if you should discard the set of hand size for frog because it keeps the counters.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it was counters, or I would have for sure. My bad. Should read the cards. Cool. I will draw a card on damage. And 6 land. I'm going to pass.
Pretty good for a 2-drop.
Indeed.
Untap, take 1. Draw. Draw for turn. Tap 5. Commander. In response.
Nope.
Everyone gets a tap 2/2 bird. That's coded forever.
This 2/2 zombie will be my 2/2 bird.
And then Surflow gets 3.
Is it through your effects? I still get it?
Yeah, he makes
the creator under my control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'll play a Vagabot Slayer naming green.
Oh, they're tapped, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's another bird. So everyone gets another bird. And Surf should have 6 birds now.
Everything's fine.
And I'll pass turn there.
I'll tap my 2 more birds. Draw. Play a forest. I'm gonna do 1, 2 green. Actually, I gotta do 3. 1, 2, 3 green. I'm gonna cast Tribute to the World Tree. Creature enters the battlefield under my control. Draw a card if it's power 3 or greater. If not, I put 2 1/1 counters on it. And then that's really all I can do at the moment because I just can only do that. I'm just gonna pass the turn.
You have to swing with your birds. You're goaded.
You want to pay 1 for?
Oh, I gotta swing with both my
Esper?
birds. My bad. I forgot about the birds. I will pay for Esper this time because actually no, I won't pay for Esper. I won't pay for Esper because I want to keep my thing up. Yeah, man. I'm gonna swing both the birds that you serve because I'm gonna imagine you're gonna send 3 at me and 3 at Lion. So
He does have 6 birds.
I know
Sure, I will respond.
there's 2 birds.
Yep. I'm gonna discard to Frog. And I will call it interest tapped. Never mind. I'll just take it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
No, I was done. My bad. I forgot the birds were goaded.
All right. Untap. And draw. See here. I'll tap 4 of red. 2 red. 2 and 3. Total of 6 with 3 red. To cast a Drakuseth Maw of Flames. Couple of triggers. I'll do. We'll discover first, so I'll discover for 7. Forest. I'll just put that to hand.
What was it?
Counterspell. Then I'll draw for Garruk's. Let's see. Land for turn. Play a forest. I'll move to combat.
Actions for attacks.
Okay, so in response to me moving to combat.
Into combat.
No, I'll act at the beginning of combat. So before attackers, but at the beginning of combat.
Okay.
All right, I'll discard to the Frog. I'm going to drop in a Noxious Gearhulk, paying 3 to make triple copies with Commander. So I will target Rendmaw, Maelstrom Wanderer, and Rin and Seri.
What's that? Destroy?
Destroy and
I'm gonna
gain life
sack
equal to toughness.
up for Savior and give Rin and Seri indestructible.
Yep. And then Maelstrom.
Yep. That's fine by
so
me.
I'll gain 10 from those 2 dying. All right.
All right. So
Go for it.
Well, I will just pass the turn, actually.
Yeah, do swing with your birds.
Oh, sorry. Keep forgetting about the birds. I tell you what, I'll keep it fair. I'll just send 1 at each of you.
I'll take 2.
Taking 2.
And then I will pass.
All right. Instead, pay 3. Discard another card to Frog. It's going to be an Archon of Cruelty. So I'll make 3 of them. I will. Let's keep it fair. I'll just send one trigger piece at each of you. So you guys are gonna discard a card, sack a creature, and lose 3 life, each of you.
This card, I'll sack one of the birds. Take 3 life.
I'll sack a bird.
Draw 3.
Let's see. We'll discard. We'll discard a Force of Will. Then take 3.
Yep, everyone should have lost 3.
Yep. Silly question. Why'd you pay 3 to do that?
So when I discard a card,
for your commander.
Commander
Right?
effect.
yeah.
Gotcha.
All right. Anyone have anything before I go to my turn? Okay. Untap. Upkeep. Draw. Oh, this is a lot. 9, 21, 33, 40 something. How many cards does everyone have?
I have 3 in hand.
6.
3 for me.
6. You've got 2 blockers, Ryan?
No, I've got 3 blockers.
Oh, right. What is your thing on top, Megatron? The gold creature?
That's my commander.
Oh, okay. Got it. I don't even know here. All right. Osier Talk and Psychic Frog are going at UG. I'll send 3 birds apiece at Ryan and Megatron. And we'll go 2 Archons at you, Ryan. Or actually, it doesn't matter. I'll send all 3 Archons at you, Ryan, and then I'll send all 3 Noxious Scarehulks at you, Megatron. So those 2.
I'll take
Osier and this. Hang on 1 sec.
Mine's
Those
18.
2.
You got 3 2/2s and 3 4/4s. It's 18.
I have attack triggers. Can you give me 1 sec, please?
All right, I'm dead. Bye.
Okie dokie. Well, I will continue to send the triggers at him, to be fair, because I was going to send 1 at each of you. So, 1 Archon trigger at each of you. So, same thing as last time. Sack a creature, discard a card, lose 3 life. I will gain 9, draw 3. Oh, I have game here. I just drew into. I'll discard Massacre Worm, make 3 copies of it. Discard Gary, make 3 copies of it. I think that's super lethal. Unless anyone has any responses.
Yeah, I wonder how many games you start off with the Osier Talk Psychic Frog combo.
First one. Oh, GG, guys.